Hi, my name is Marisol Lucero. This will be my presentation on an educator's role and well-being effects in the classroom. So going forward, the purpose of this study is to examine how educators' mental health and educational background play a role in the children's positive learning. So essentially looking at the role of an educator and how their mental health, well-being, and sort of an array of other factors and concerns from a well-being standpoint can affect the children's development, their own mental health in their classroom setting, and overall academic success with that educator who's there with them. So more specifically, looking at my research question, how does mental health and education of educators promote higher quality experiences in childcare? So a lot of literature I looked at really supported and substantiated this idea that educators are such a crucial part of the learning environment. But the idea that the educator has to be in a well state of mind, that is to say, besides the basics of taking care of themselves, sleeping well, eating well, receiving further education, just sort of such a span of aspects were really important to look at, and the effects that a well taken care of educator can have on children in the classroom. So some of the evidence that I looked up was able to pull from the How Does Learning Happen document, from various other research articles, mostly concurrent, just a couple, maybe one here that was dated from some time ago, but still just provided so much valuable information and insight, right? Even from, say, 21 years ago, it's still something proven today that we can see the idea that teacher education is the best predictor of teacher effectiveness. So also looking at that educational standpoint of what education does a person have? What education does an educator have behind them to support their teaching and their planning and their interactions that are happening on a daily basis with children? We know from students that those critical years are 0 to 5, 0 to 6, and everything is just happening exponentially. And there's so much value and so much significance in making sure that children are just treated fairly, are having genuine relationships, are observing pro-social behavior and responsive um, actions from their educators in the room. And then also looking at the idea that the literature also acknowledged that there's just so much going on in the classroom, and so much that weighs on the shoulders of an educator. I think, if anything, this research project sort of stemmed from the last couple of years in the pandemic that have been very difficult for so many people. Looking at how the workload, on top of all the pressures, all the changes, all the different aspects that have come alongside being able to plan, interact, and take care of oneself, have really dominated many of the concerns around what an educator brings to the table in the classroom and the effects that this can have on children long term. So the qualitative methods looked at narrative design, which included 3 HBCL student participants who were volunteered throughout the process at the initial recruiting stage. Non-specific grouping of demographic or requirements were met, and the phone interviews took about 10 to 12 minutes and were just transcribed later for data collection. Some of the findings I found to be were are highlighted in the themes here. So looking at how education was highly valued, mental health awareness was something that participants really were aware of, sort of looking at a wide scale of aspects in regards and correlation to well-being and success in the classroom, and how that is a collective with the educator, their background, the children's success, the children's learning, and everyone's well-being and mental health really came correlated into one sort of very uh, powerful structure of learning and importance when we look at classroom settings and the roles that the educators play in those classrooms. So this question here, this graph here correlated to the quantitative findings. So we'll that I'll jump to in a little bit. So looking at how participants responded based on their interviews and then correlating that to the Survey Monkey, it seems like there was a very strong consensus that every aspect is valued, and not one person exactly pointed to the fact that the educator is the most prevalent or valuable um, sort of entity in the room. A lot of them did place high value there, but also recognize that this educator just streams from so many other branches of relevant value that are in the classroom. So looking at the learning environment, the interactions, and the quality of the curriculum were all equally somewhat distributed within the participants and the Survey Monkey results. The literature review and qualitative analysis collected showed correlations and themes and ideas present throughout the research. So again, just looking at some of the research and data that supported it through the literature review, education as being highly valued, again, one of the themes that was prevalent, looking at the fact that it is important that ECs are taught strategies and feel capable. That was dominant in a lot of the research, making sure that ECEs are not just, as many perceive it, to be a caregiver, but are actually being given high quality training, high quality uh, support systems. And again, that mental health awareness theme, which is just very much prevalent in this day and age with everything that's been happening in childcare. There's been definitely an increase in the workloads, the psychological effects, the mental health concerns. Um, and a lot of literature has supported that. Unfortunately, although they've supported the idea and appear to be um, translating the effects of what the pandemic has had on educators, there's still a gap that's relevant, that's prevalent in showing how it affects children. But the well-being and success in the classroom, so not just structural supports, but sensitive and responsive interactions, are linked to positive child outcomes such as social skills, language, and early literacy. And then, so jumping into the quantitative method, the online questionnaire, which was the SurveyMonkey questionnaire, with 13 selected participants, also part of the HBCL community and students. There was 10 questions, multiple choice selection, nearly accurate completion by participants. That's just to say a couple of participants, I believe one had skipped one question, and then another one had failed to simply identify themselves in the naming process in the first question. So looking at the quantitative research overview, the research topic then looked at educators' effects on children and the learning environment. The purpose of the study was to examine how educators' mental health and educational background play a role in children's positive learning. The overarching primary research question looked at how does mental health and education of educators promote those higher quality experiences that I was looking into. Um, and just directly looking maybe at as a stem from that, how children's mental health is impacted both short term, so in the present moment, attending those centers on a day-to-day basis, and in the long term. Again, this is something that the research showed was still not very much inundated with data at the moment. Again, it's still fairly early. Perhaps a longitudinal study would show maybe the effects concurrently, and then over the next couple of years, as hopefully more support systems um, come into effect and more awareness is there. So again, just looking at some of the SurveyMonkey results, this graph here at the top asked if participants felt that an educator's mental health and well-being had a major impact essentially on children in the classroom. So 100% said to some effect yes, and only one answered sometimes. And then looking at how the participants or students were aware of any effects of any services available for their mental health or support systems, it seems like it was kind of across the spectrum, with 40% looking at not aware at all, about 20 yes, aware of some, and then the majority of them looking at possibly, but very vaguely. The findings of the majority of participants shared an expected profile of experience, with only a slight decrease in participants stating they had not received further education or academic credentials. Further studies conducted would be able to draw more conclusive data analysis. So essentially, looking at these other two, just looking at did they have any experience, the the majority of the students did, which was great. And aside from the program, had any of them completed any further study? So again, majority of them had, and perhaps future studies could correlate that to there being some sort of majority of interest in making sure that they have an educational background in their career choice as educators and seeing value within those line parameters. Overall, both the qualitative data collection method, the phone interviews, and the quantitative data collection method proved valuable to the research process and purpose. Some of the limitations extended from, again, not being able to recruit a larger sample size, not being able to select the demographics. So whether or not, let's say they were all educators, because many of them are still in the program, they might have not had that experience, as I believe one participant in the survey in the quantitative survey did not, and then inability to pilot test it, to get a couple of recruits to get that feedback and to sort of build on those expectations of how to implement the methodology more successfully. And the survey parameters, so just the idea that SurveyMonkey again only gave us 10 questions, or which we had to include the demographic and a couple of other things, sort of was a limiting factor. And definitely concepts to be explored further would look at qualitative research, and just getting a general consensus and better understanding of the whole research process, because there's just so much to look at. But overall, this research project was, I think, an amazing experience and ability to bring forth something that's really prevalent and occurring right now in the world of early childhood education, and something that as educators or future educators, we really need to be cognizant of, and ensure that we're bringing forth this advocacy to maybe put more research into the fact that mental health is not a stigma, and that it's very valuable to the child and quality care sector. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and take care.